The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Academy at dawn. Hana dropped her coffee cup when she heard the sound. She had worked at the academy for 3 years, and the emergency alarm had never gone off before. She ran toward the main hall where everyone was gathering. Talon stood at the center of the crowd. He was a Vrexian, which meant he was huge. His scales were dark green and his claws could tear through metal. But right now, the massive security chief looked worried. Next to him stood 3 Vrexian parents, and they were making sounds that Hana had never heard before. Low, desperate sounds that made her chest hurt. 3 cubs are missing, Talon announced. His voice was tight. They were on a supervised field trip to the Outer Valley. When the teacher did the count for return, 3 cubs were gone. The crowd went silent. Vrexian cubs were not like human children. Even at young ages, they had claws and teeth. They were predators, but they were still children, and now they were missing. We found tracks, Talon continued. Krenthak hunters took them. Everyone started talking at once. The Krenthaks were bad news. They captured rare creatures and sold them to fighting rings across the galaxy. They had ships, weapons, and a fortress in the Crimson Canyons. Nobody messed with Krenthak hunters. We are contacting the Galactic Council, one of the Academy directors said. They will handle this through proper channels. That will take weeks. One of the Vrexian mothers roared. Her name was Nira, and her daughter Kira was one of the missing cubs. My baby does not have weeks. We cannot just attack their base, the director argued. There are laws, treaties. If we send military forces, it could start a war. Hana watched the Vrexian parents. She had studied their species for years. Vrexians were known as the fiercest predators in the galaxy. They could fight better than almost any species. But right now, these powerful beings could do nothing. The law tied their hands. That was when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Where exactly are these hunters? Hana turned and saw Daehyun standing near the doorway. He was a cargo pilot who delivered supplies to the academy twice a month. He was average height for a human with dark hair and tired eyes. He usually kept to himself, did his job, and left quickly. This does not concern you, human, Talon said. But there was no anger in his voice. Just exhaustion. I asked where they are, Daehyun repeated. He walked forward through the crowd. Alien stepped aside, looking down at the small human with confusion. Talon studied him for a long moment. The Crimson Canyons, a cave system in the eastern range. They have 17 hunters, energy barriers, and enough weapons to hold off a small army. How long ago were the cubs taken? 6 hours, Daehyun nodded slowly. They will be scared, probably showing aggression to hide the fear. The hunters will keep them in cages, waiting for buyers. How do you know this? Nira asked. She leaned down, bringing her massive head close to Daehyun. Her breath was hot and her teeth were longer than his fingers. Because fear makes all children act the same way, Daehyun said quietly, and hunters are predictable. They want the cubs alive and healthy for sale. That gives us time. Us? Talon asked. There is no us, human. The council will negotiate. The council will take too long, Daehyun said. You know it, I know it. Everyone here knows it. The Vrexian father, whose name was Kale, made a deep growling sound. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting I go get them. The room exploded with noise. Aliens laughed. Some looked angry. Others looked confused. Hana pushed through the crowd to reach Daehyun. Have you lost your mind? She whispered. You cannot fight 17 Krenthak hunters. You are one human with no military training. I was not planning to fight them, Daehyun said. Then what is your plan? He looked at her with those tired eyes. I will think of something. Talon raised his hand and the room went quiet again. I appreciate the offer, human. But this is suicide. You would die and the cubs would still be trapped. Maybe, Daehyun agreed. But right now I am the only one offering to do anything at all. The truth of those words hung in the air. The Galactic Council would debate for days. The Academy could not send forces without starting a diplomatic crisis. The Vrexian parents could not go themselves without breaking a dozen laws. But Daehyun was just a cargo pilot, a nobody. If he went and failed, it would not start a war. It would barely make the news. Nira approached Daehyun slowly. She lowered herself until she was at his eye level. Why would you do this? You do not know my daughter. You do not know any of us. Humans and Vrexians are not even allies. Daehyun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I had a niece. She was 7. She got trapped in a collapsed building during an earthquake. I was part of the rescue team. It took us 18 hours to reach her. When I found her, she was so scared that she bit my hand when I tried to pick her up. But I got her out. I got her home to her mother. Your niece survived? Nira asked. Yes, because someone went in after her, because someone decided she was worth the risk. He looked at each of the Rexian parents. Your cubs are worth the risk? Nira reached up with one clawed hand. She touched a spot on her chest and pulled away a scale. Rexian scales did not come off easily. It clearly hurt. She held the scale out to Daehyun. It was deep blue and crystalline, catching the light. This is my heart scale, she said. It is the most precious thing a Rexian can give. If you bring my Kira home, you will be family. If you die trying, I will make sure every being in the galaxy knows a human tried to save my child when no one else would. Daehyun took the scale carefully. He put it in his jacket pocket right over his heart. Talon sighed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. I cannot officially help you, but I can give you the location coordinates and tell you that the hunters change guard shifts at midnight. I can also mention that the eastern approach has fewer sensors than the western one. That is helpful, Daehyun said. Hana grabbed his arm. You are really doing this? Yes, you are insane. Probably. She hugged him quickly. Come back alive, please. I will do my best, he promised. 2 hours later, Daehyun was flying his small cargo ship toward the Crimson Canyons. The coordinates Talon provided showed the hunter beast clearly. He studied the layout, memorized the approach, and went through his supplies. He had no weapons. He had never been good with weapons anyway. What he did have was a med kit, some rope, food rations, and a clear memory of what scared children looked like. Rexian or human, it did not matter. Fear was fear. The canyons appeared on his view screen. Red rocks twisted into impossible shapes. The hunter base was deep inside, hidden from aerial scans. Daehyun landed his ship 3 kilometers away and started walking. He thought about Kira, Ven, and Sola, 3 children who were probably terrified right now. 3 children who needed someone to come for them. I am coming, he whispered to the wind. Just hold on a little longer. The Crimson Canyon swallowed him whole as he walked toward the hunter's lair. The Crimson Canyons were hot. Daehyun felt sweat running down his back as he climbed over the red rocks. The sun beat down on him, making everything shimmer. He had been walking for 2 hours, following the coordinates Talon gave him. He saw the cave entrance before the guards saw him. 2 Krenthak hunters stood outside holding energy rifles. They were tall, with gray skin that looked like leather. Their eyes were small and mean. Daehyun watched them from behind a rock formation, studying their patterns. The smart thing would be to wait for darkness, to sneak in quietly. But Daehyun knew that every hour those cubs spent in cages was an hour of trauma that would stay with them forever. He had seen it before with rescued children on Earth. Time mattered, so he did something that seemed completely crazy. He stood up and walked directly toward the entrance. The guards saw him immediately. They raised their weapons, shouting in the Krenthak language. Daehyun kept his hands visible and empty. He stopped 10 meters away from them. I need to speak with your leader, he called out in Galactic Common. I have a business proposal. The guards looked at each other. One of them spoke into a communication device. They kept their weapons pointed at Daehyun while they waited. After a few minutes, more hunters came out of the cave. They surrounded him, patting him down for weapons. They found nothing except his jacket, his med kit, and some food rations. Grax will see you, one of them said. But if you try anything stupid, we will kill you slowly. They dragged him into the cave system. The temperature dropped as they went deeper. The caves were lit with electric lights strung along the walls. Daehyun counted the guards he saw, 14 so far. That meant 3 more were probably deeper inside or on patrol. They brought him to a large central chamber. It was clearly the main living area for the hunters. There were sleeping mats, supply crates, and a cooking area. And in the corner, behind bars of energy that glowed blue, were 3 small Vrexian cubs. Daehyun felt his chest tighten when he saw them. They were huddled together in the smallest cage. Kyra was the smallest, her scales a lighter green than her siblings. Ven was in the middle, trying to look brave. Sola was the largest, and she had a cut on her shoulder that needed cleaning. The cubs saw him too. Their eyes were wide with fear. They pressed themselves against the back of the cage, hissing. It was pure defensive behavior. They were terrified. A human? A voice boomed across the chamber. Grax stood up from where he had been sitting. He was the largest Krenthak Daehyun had ever seen. Scars covered his arms and face. This is unexpected. Humans usually stay far away from our operations. I came to make a deal, Daehyun said, forcing his voice to stay calm. Grax laughed. A deal? Human, we have 3 Vrexian cubs. Do you know what they are worth? A single cub can sell for 50,000 credits to the fighting rings. These 3 will make us rich. I know what they are worth, Daehyun agreed. But they are too scared to be valuable right now. Look at them. They are hissing at everything. They have not eaten. The big one is injured. When buyers come, they want healthy cubs that show spirit, not terrified babies. Grax stepped closer, studying Daehyun with interest. And you think you can fix this? I think I can do better than fix it. I will make you a bet. The other hunters in the chamber moved closer, interested now. Krenthaks loved bets. They loved games. It was part of their culture. What kind of bet? Grax asked. Open that cage. Let me go inside with those cubs. I will stay in there unarmed for 1 full rotation of this planet. That is about 26 hours by my calculation. If I can get all 3 cubs to follow me out of that cage willingly, without forcing them or drugging them, they go free. If I fail, you keep the cubs and you can have my ship. It is worth at least 30,000 credits. The chamber went completely silent. Then the hunters started laughing. It was loud, mean laughter that echoed off the cave walls. You want to go into a cage with 3 Vrexian cubs? Grax asked, still laughing. Human, those cubs are scared and angry. They will tear you apart. We have been poking them with sticks just to keep them away from the cage bars. That is the bet, Daehyun said simply. Grax stopped laughing. He looked at Daehyun with something close to respect. You are either very brave or very stupid, maybe both. He thought for a moment, then grinned, showing all his sharp teeth. I accept your bet. This will be entertaining for my crew. We have been bored lately. One condition, Daehyun added. Nobody touches me or the cubs during the 26 hours. No poking with sticks. No loud noises to scare them. You watch, but you do not interfere. Agreed, Grax said. But when those cubs kill you in the first hour, I want your ship codes. If I die, the codes are in my jacket pocket, Daehyun said. The hunters gathered around the cage, talking excitedly among themselves. They started placing bets on how long the human would last. Most gave him less than an hour. A few generous ones said maybe 2 hours. Grax walked to the cage controls. Any last words, human? Daehyun looked at the 3 cubs. They were watching him with wide, frightened eyes. He thought about Kira's mother, Nira, and the heart scale in his pocket. He thought about his niece and the day he pulled her from that collapsed building. Open the cage, he said quietly. The energy bars disappeared. The cubs pressed themselves harder against the back wall, their small claws out. Daehyun stepped inside. The energy bars reappeared behind him, sealing him in. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hunters watched with eager eyes. The cubs hissed and showed their teeth. Daehyun stood near the entrance of the cage, as far from the cubs as possible in the small space. Then he did something that confused everyone watching. He sat down. He just sat down on the floor, cross-legged, with his back against the side of the cage. He was not even looking at the cubs. What is he doing? One of the hunters asked. He is sitting, Grax said, sounding disappointed. Maybe humans are just stupid after all, but Daehyun knew exactly what he was doing. He had studied animal behavior and child psychology during his rescue training years ago. Scared creatures did not respond to aggression or direct attention. They needed time. They needed predictability. They needed someone who was not a threat. He closed his eyes and started to hum. It was a song his grandmother used to sing to him when he was small and scared of the dark. An old Korean lullaby about the moon and stars. The melody was soft and gentle. The cubs stopped hissing. They were confused now instead of terrified. This strange creature was not attacking them. It was not even looking at them. It was just sitting there, making soft sounds. Daehyun kept humming. He reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a food ration bar. He broke off a small piece and placed it on the floor, then pushed it gently toward the cubs. He went back to humming, not watching them, not pressuring them. The hunters were getting restless. "This is boring," one of them complained. "Give it time," Grax said. But even he sounded doubtful. Hours passed. Dae-hyun kept his routine. He would hum for a while, then sing softly in Korean. He would break off pieces of food and slide them toward the cubs. He never looked directly at them. He never reached toward them. He just stayed calm and predictable. The cubs watched him. Slowly, very slowly, their fear started to fade. Fear is exhausting. It takes energy to stay scared all the time, and this strange creature was not hurting them. It was offering food. It was making soothing sounds. Kira was the first to move. She was the smallest and the hungriest. She crept forward slowly, ready to run back at any second. She grabbed the piece of food and ran back to her siblings. But nothing bad happened. The human did not attack. It just kept making those soft sounds. Dae-hyun smiled inside but did not show it on his face. First step complete. Now came the hard part. Building trust took time, and he had about 20 hours left. The hunters settled in to watch, still convinced the human would fail. But they were starting to wonder. This was not going the way they expected. Dae-hyun kept singing softly to the 3 frightened cubs, his voice the only sound of kindness they had heard since being taken from their families. 12 hours had passed since Dae-hyun entered the cage. The hunters had grown bored and most had gone to sleep or patrol. Only Grax remained watching, fascinated by what he was seeing. The cubs were no longer huddled in the corner. They had spread out a little. Ven was lying down, exhausted from fear and stress. Sola was still watchful but no longer hissing, and Kira, the smallest one, had moved closer to Dae-hyun. She was now only 2 meters away, watching him with curious eyes. Dae-hyun had not stopped his gentle routine. He sang Korean songs his grandmother taught him. He told quiet stories in a soft voice. It did not matter that the cubs could not understand the words. They understood the tone. They understood that this creature meant no harm. "You are called Kira," Dae-hyun said softly, looking at the smallest cub. He used Galactic Common now, speaking each word slowly. "Your mother Nira is waiting for you. She gave me her heart scale to bring you home." Kira tilted her head at the sound of her name. Something in her small brain recognized it. She took another step closer. Dae-hyun slowly pulled out the blue crystalline scale from his pocket. He held it where Kira could see it, letting the light reflect off its surface. The cub's eyes widened. She knew that scale. She could probably smell her mother on it. She moved closer, sniffing the air. Dae-hyun stayed very still. Kira came close enough to touch the scale with her nose. Then very carefully she settled down next to Dae-hyun's leg, not touching him but close. Closer than she had been to any living thing since being taken. Grax leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Impossible," he whispered. Dae-hyun gently, very gently placed his hand near Kira. Not on her. Just near her so she could move away if she wanted. She sniffed his hand. Her small forked tongue came out, tasting the air. Then she pressed her scaled head against his palm. The touch was light. Testing. Dae-hyun did not grab her. He just let his hand rest there, warm and steady. Kira pressed harder, and Dae-hyun began to very gently scratch behind the bony ridge above her eyes. His grandmother had a dog once, and it loved being scratched in certain spots. All animals had those spots. Even predatory alien cubs, apparently. Kira made a sound. It was not a hiss or a growl. It was a soft rumbling, almost like a purr. The sound of contentment. Ven watched this from across the cage. He was older than Kira and more cautious, but he was also tired and hungry and scared, and his little sister seemed safe with this strange creature. He stood up slowly and moved closer. Dae-hyun reached into his pocket with his free hand and pulled out another ration bar. He broke it in half and placed one piece near Ven. The cub sniffed it, then ate it quickly. Then he came closer and settled on Dae-hyun's other side. Sola was the last. She was the biggest and had been hurt. She did not trust easily. But she watched her siblings pressed against the human, calm and safe for the first time in hours. Slowly, she moved forward. When she got close enough, Dae-hyun saw the cut on her shoulder clearly. It was not deep, but it was dirty. It could get infected if not cleaned. "I need to look at your shoulder," Dae-hyun said softly to Sola. "I will not hurt you, I promise." He moved very slowly, reaching for his medkit. Sola tensed, ready to run, but Kira, still pressed against Dae-hyun's leg, made a soft chirping sound. It seemed to calm her sister. Dae-hyun opened the medkit and pulled out antiseptic and bandages. He let Sola smell everything first. Then, moving slower than he had ever moved in his life, he cleaned the wound. Sola growled quietly but did not pull away. The antiseptic must have stung, but she stayed still. "Good girl," Dae-hyun whispered. "You're very brave. Your parents will be proud." He wrapped the bandage carefully around her shoulder. When he finished, Sola surprised him by lowering her head and butting it gently against his chest. It was a gesture of trust, of acceptance. All 3 cubs were now pressed against Dae-hyun. They formed a small pile of scales and claws and warm bodies, and in the middle of them sat one human, humming old songs from Earth. Grax stood up and walked closer to the cage. The movement made the cubs tense, but they did not leave Dae-hyun's side. They looked to him first, checking if he was worried. When he stayed calm, they stayed calm. "How?" Grax asked. "How did you do this?" "Vrexian cubs are wild. They attack anything that comes near them when they are scared." Dae-hyun looked up at the hunter leader. "They are not wild. They are children. All children are the same when they are scared. They need to feel safe. They need someone who will not hurt them. They need patience and kindness." "Patience and kindness," Grax repeated the words like they were from a foreign language. "These are not traits valued by Krenthax." "Maybe they should be," Dae-hyun said quietly. The remaining hours passed peacefully. The cubs slept, taking turns pressing against Dae-hyun's warmth. He dozed lightly but never fully slept. He kept one hand on Kira and one on Ven. Sola had draped herself across his legs, apparently deciding he was a comfortable pillow. When the 26 hours were finally up, the other hunters had all returned to watch. They could not believe what they were seeing. 3 Vrexian predator cubs sleeping peacefully with a human like he was their parent. "Time is up," Grax announced. "The bed is complete. Human, if you can walk out of that cage with all 3 cubs following you willingly, you win." Dae-hyun nodded. He gently touched each cub, waking them softly. "Hey, little ones. Time to go home. Your families are waiting." Kira woke first and looked up at him with those big eyes. Ven stretched, his claws extending and retracting. Sola yawned, showing all her sharp teeth. Dae-hyun stood up slowly. The cubs stood with him, staying close to his legs. He pulled out Nira's heart scale and showed it to them again. "Home," he said simply, pointing to the cage door. Grax deactivated the energy bars. The cage door was now open. The hunters held their breath. Dae-hyun walked toward the exit, and the 3 cubs followed him. Not because they were forced. Not because they were drugged. They followed him because they chose to. Because he was safe. Because he had shown them kindness when everything else had been frightening and cruel. When Dae-hyun stepped out of the cage, all 3 cubs came with him. They stayed pressed against his legs, looking around nervously at all the hunters, but they did not run back to the cage. They trusted the human more than they feared the hunters. The chamber was absolutely silent. 17 hardened Krenthax hunters stared at the impossible sight before them. A lone human standing with 3 Vrexian cubs who clearly saw him as a protector. One of the younger hunters reached for his weapon. It was instinct. The cubs were valuable. Maybe they could still keep them. But the moment the hunter moved, all 3 cubs reacted. They did not run and hide. They moved in front of Dae-hyun, forming a protective triangle around him. Sola growled, a deep threatening sound that promised violence. These cubs would fight for the human who had been kind to them. Grax held up his hand, stopping the young hunter. "No, a bet is a bet." The human won fairly. He approached Dae-hyun and the cubs tensed, but Dae-hyun placed his hands gently on Kira and Ven, and they relaxed slightly. "I have been a hunter for 30 years, Grax said. "I have captured hundreds of creatures. I thought I understood predators. But you showed me something today, human. You showed me that there is more than one kind of strength." He paused. "What is your name?" "Dae-hyun," he answered. "Dae-hyun," Grax repeated. "The Krenthax clans will remember this day. We will remember the human who walked into our lair and won without fighting. Go. Take the cubs home. You earned them. Dae-hyun nodded. Thank you for keeping your word. He started walking toward the cave exit. The 3 cubs followed close behind him, their small claws clicking on the stone floor. The hunters parted to let them pass, staring in silence. As they reached the tunnel leading out, Kira looked back at Grax one last time. Then she pressed closer to Dae-hyun's leg and followed him into the tunnel. Away from the hunters. Away from the cages. Toward home. The morning sun was bright when they emerged from the caves. Dae-hyun squinted in the light. The cubs blinked, their large eyes adjusting. Then Kira looked up at him and made that soft chirping sound again. The sound that meant safety. That meant family. Let's get you home, Dae-hyun said gently. Your parents are waiting. The long walk back to his ship began. 3 small cubs and 1 tired human, walking together through the crimson canyons toward a better future. The journey back to the academy took 6 hours by ship. Dae-hyun flew carefully, aware that his passengers were still fragile from their trauma. The 3 cubs sat in the cargo area, huddled together but calmer now. Every few minutes one of them would come forward to check on him, pressing their nose against his arm before returning to the others. He had sent a message ahead. Just 3 words. I have them. Now as his ship approached the academy landing pads, Dae-hyun could see the crowd waiting. It looked like the entire academy had turned out. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all gathered to witness the return. He landed the ship gently and sat for a moment, gathering his courage for what came next. The hard part was not over. The cubs had bonded to him through their shared experience. Reuniting them with their parents would require care. He could not just hand them over like packages. Okay, little ones, he said softly, turning to face the cubs. Your families are out there. Your mother and father, they have been so worried about you. Kira chirped and pressed against his leg. She knew the word mother. She knew the word father. But right now she felt safe with Dae-hyun. Change was scary, even change for the better. The cargo door opened and noise rushed in. Voices calling, people moving, the sound of a massive crowd. The cubs pressed closer to Dae-hyun, nervous. He stepped out slowly, and the 3 cubs followed right at his heels. The crowd gasped. He heard whispers in a dozen languages. Saw faces filled with shock and wonder. A human had done the impossible. Talon pushed through the crowd first, his massive frame clearing a path. Behind him came Nira, Kale, and the other Vrexian parents. When Nira saw her cubs, she made a sound that was part roar, part sob. She started running forward. Wait! Dae-hyun called out, holding up his hand. His voice was not loud, but something in it made everyone stop. Please, they are scared. Too much. Too fast will frighten them. Nira stopped immediately, though it clearly took all her self-control. Her whole body was shaking with the need to hold her babies. Kyle stood beside her, his claws digging into the ground. Dae-hyun knelt down to the cubs' level. He spoke softly, just to them. Look, see those 2 big Vrexians? That is your mama and papa. They love you so much. They have been waiting for you. Kira looked where Dae-hyun pointed. Her small nostrils flared as she scented the air. Something in her recognized those smells. Family. Home. Her tail, which had been tucked tight against her body, relaxed slightly. It is okay to go to them, Dae-hyun whispered. I will be right here. I am not leaving. Hana had moved close to Dae-hyun. She understood what he was doing. You need to release them emotionally, she said quietly. Let them know they can leave you. Dae-hyun nodded. He gently nudged Kira toward her parents. Go on. They missed you. Kira took 1 step forward, then another. She kept looking back at Dae-hyun, making sure he was still there. Ven and Sola watched their sister, uncertain. Nira lowered herself to the ground, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. She extended her neck, showing her throat in a gesture of peace. Kale did the same. They were offering complete vulnerability to their own cubs, showing that they meant no harm. Kira moved faster now. She broke into a run, and then she was pressed against her mother's chest. Nira wrapped her large arms around her baby carefully, like Kira was made of glass. Tears ran down the adult Vrexian's face. They were not like human tears, but the emotion was the same. Ven and Sola ran to their father. Kale gathered them close, making soft rumbling sounds deep in his chest. It was the sound Vrexian fathers made to soothe their young. The crowd erupted in cheers. Beings from 100 worlds celebrated the reunion. But Daehyun noticed something. Kira kept looking back at him, even while pressed against her mother. Her eyes were confused. She had two sources of safety now, and her young brain was trying to understand how that worked. Daehyun walked forward slowly and sat down near the Rexian family. Nira looked at him and understanding passed between them. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for bringing them home. Thank you for treating them with gentleness when they needed it most." "They are good cubs," Daehyun said simply. "They were very brave." Kira wiggled out of her mother's arms and came to Daehyun. She settled against his side, then looked up at her mother as if asking permission. Nira's expression softened even more. "It is okay, little one," Nira said to her daughter. "He is family now. He saved you. In Vrexian culture, that makes him pack. You can love both of us." The words were important. They gave Kira permission to feel what she felt. She chirped happily and pressed her head against Daehyun's hand, asking for the scratches she liked. Talon approached and placed his massive clawed hand on Daehyun's shoulder. The gesture was careful, conscious of human fragility. "You did what our warriors could not do. You did what our diplomats could not do. You walked into danger and brought our children home unharmed." His voice dropped lower. "The Vrexian people do not forget debts like this. You are under our protection now, Daehyun. Always." Other aliens came forward to see the cubs, but they kept a respectful distance, aware that the family needed space. A group of Academy scholars whispered among themselves, already planning research papers about the bonding behavior they had witnessed. A Centaurian diplomat, tall and thin with blue skin, approached Daehyun. "I must ask, how did you do it? We have studied Vrexian cubs for decades. They do not bond with other species, especially not when traumatized." Daehyun thought about how to explain it. "I did not try to dominate them. I did not try to control them. I just showed them that I would not hurt them. I was patient. I was calm. I gave them time to decide I was safe." "But why did they choose to trust you?" Another scholar asked, this one a floating jellyfish-like being that communicated through a translation device. "Because humans are good at this," Hana said, stepping forward. She had been listening to the questions. "It is part of our evolution. Humans formed bonds with other species on our world. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We made friends with cats, horses, birds. We learned to read the emotions of other species and respond to them. It is in our nature to try to connect." The jellyfish scholar pulsed thoughtfully. "So this is a human trait? This ability to bond across species lines?" "Yes," Hana said firmly. "And before today, the galaxy thought it made us weak, emotional, irrational. But Daehyun proved that it makes us strong in ways you never considered." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Humans had always been viewed as the soft species, too emotional, too attached to feelings, not aggressive enough. But this human had accomplished something that armed warriors could not. He had saved 3 predator cubs through nothing but patience and empathy. A young Vrexian from the academy, not much older than the cubs, approached shyly. "Can I meet them?" he asked Daehyun. Daehyun looked at Nira, who nodded permission. "Come slowly," Daehyun said. "Let them smell you first, and stay calm. They can sense fear and anxiety." The young Vrexian approached carefully, following Daehyun's instructions. Kira sniffed him curiously, recognized him as her own species, and allowed him to come closer. Soon other young beings from the academy were carefully approaching, wanting to greet the cubs who had been through so much. Daehyun watched it all with tired eyes. He had not slept properly in over 30 hours. His body ached from sitting in that cage, but he felt peaceful. The cubs were home. They were safe. They would heal from their trauma because they were surrounded by love. "You need rest," Hana said, reading his exhaustion. "Come on, I will take you to the guest quarters." Daehyun nodded. He went to stand, but Kira immediately protested with a worried chirp. He knelt down and scratched behind her eye ridges one more time. "I will visit," he promised her. "I am not going far, and you need to spend time with your family now." Nira placed a large, gentle claw on his shoulder. "You will always be welcome in our den, Daehyun. You are packed now. That is forever." As Daehyun walked toward the academy building with Hana, he looked back once. The 3 cubs were playing now, their trauma beginning to fade as they felt safe again. Their parents watched them with joy and relief. The galaxy had learned something today. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was to be gentle, Sometimes the bravest thing was to care, and humans understood this in a way that other species were just beginning to see. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue. The Galactic Academy was hosting a unity ceremony to celebrate the Cubs' safe return and to honor those who helped. Dae-hyun had tried to refuse the invitation, but Hana convinced him to attend. He stood at the edge of the ceremony hall, uncomfortable with the attention. The hall was filled with beings from dozens of worlds. Banners hung from the ceiling in rainbow colors. A stage had been set up where speeches would be given. The 3 Cubs had been through rehabilitation sessions with xenopsychologists. They were doing well, better than anyone expected. The trauma was there, but it was fading. They played with other young ones at the academy. They slept peacefully at night. Sola's shoulder had healed completely, but they still asked about Dae-hyun every day. They still looked for him when something scared them. The bond formed in that cage had not faded. Nira and Kale had visited Dae-hyun several times. They brought him gifts, traditional Vrexian tokens of gratitude. A carved stone, a woven cloth made from shed scales, things that meant family in their culture. "You look like you want to run away," Hana said, appearing beside him with 2 drinks. "I am a cargo pilot," Dae-hyun said, "not a hero. I do not belong at ceremonies. You saved 3 lives. That makes you exactly the kind of person who belongs here." The ceremony began with speeches from academy directors and diplomats. They talked about cooperation between species, about understanding and peace. The words were pretty but felt empty to Dae-hyun. He had not saved the Cubs because of philosophy. He saved them because they were children who needed help. Then Talon took the stage. The massive Vrexian looked uncomfortable in his ceremonial armor. "I am not good with speeches," he began. "But I know what I saw. I saw a human do what we could not. He walked into danger with no weapons, no armor, just kindness, and he brought our children home." He paused. "The Vrexian clans have voted. Dae-hyun is declared a friend of our people. He will always have our protection and our gratitude." The crowd applauded. Dae-hyun felt his face getting hot with embarrassment. Then the Vrexian families were invited to the stage with their cubs. Kira, Ven, and Sola walked out with their parents. They looked healthy and happy. The crowd made appreciative sounds, seeing the Cubs thriving after their ordeal. During the presentation, a human child wandered toward the stage. Her name was Borum. She was 7 years old, and her parents worked at the academy as engineers. She had seen the Cubs from a distance and was curious. The crowd tensed. Vrexians were very protective of their young. Having another species' child approach could be seen as a threat. Adult Vrexians had been known to attack when they perceived danger to their cubs, but Kira noticed Borum. The little Vrexian cub tilted her head, watching the human child approach. There was something familiar about her. Small, young, non-threatening. Like Dae-hyun, but smaller. Borum walked right up to Kira without fear. Children did not have the same hesitations as adults. She reached out her small hand toward Kira's head. Every adult in the room held their breath. Nira moved to intercept, instinct telling her to protect her cub from the stranger. But Kira did something unexpected. She leaned into Borum's touch. She made that soft rumbling sound, the sound of contentment. Then she gently pressed her scaled head against the little girl's hand. Borum giggled. "She is warm," she said in her child's voice. The crowd exhaled collectively. It was unprecedented. Vrexian cubs did not allow other species to touch them, especially not children of other species. But Kira had learned something from Dae-hyun. She learned that small, gentle creatures could be friends. Van and Sola came closer, curious about this new young being. Soon all 3 cubs were letting Borum pet them, fascinated by the tiny human who smelled a little like Dae-hyun but different. Then Kira did something that made the entire academy go silent. She turned and looked across the crowd. Her eyes found Dae-hyun standing at the back of the hall. She made a happy chirping sound and started walking toward him. Her parents followed, confused. Kira walked right up to Dae-hyun. She pressed against his legs like she had in the cave. She looked up at him with those large, intelligent eyes. And then she spoke. "Mama." The word was not perfect. Her Vrexian vocal cords were not designed for human language. But it was clear enough. She had said "Mama." The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Xenolinguists in the crowd were stunned. Vrexian cubs could not make those sounds. Their anatomy was wrong for it. But Kira had tried anyway. She had forced her vocal cords to form a word from a language not her own. She called him Mama, someone whispered. The whisper spread through the crowd like fire. The tiny Vrexian cub had called the human Mama. Hana moved closer, her eyes wide. Daehyun, do you understand what this means? He knelt down and gently scratched behind Kira's eye ridges. The cub pressed into his touch, making her happy sounds. What does it mean? He asked quietly. She created a new word for you. Hana explained, her voice shaking with emotion. Vrexians have words for mother and father in their language. But she learned the human word mama from hearing the human children at the academy. She chose that word for you because you are not her biological mother, but you are something equally important to her. An elderly Vrexian scholar pushed forward through the crowd. She was old. Her scales faded to light gray. In our culture, we have a concept called pack parent. Any adult who saves a cub's life and cares for them becomes part of that cub's family forever. Not replacing the biological parents, but joining them. She looked at Daehyun with respect. This cub has declared you her pack parent. It is a sacred bond in Vrexian society. Nira approached and Daehyun stood up quickly, uncertain. But the large Vrexian mother was not angry. Her eyes were gentle. She is right, Nira said. You are pack now. Not just to our clan, but to her specifically. She has chosen you. She paused. Vrexian cubs always remember who saved them. Who made them feel safe when they were most afraid. That memory stays with them their whole lives. Kale stepped forward and placed something around Daehyun's neck. It was a pendant made of crystal and metal, carved with Vrexian symbols. This is a family medallion. It tells all Vrexians that you are pack, that our den is your den, that our family is your family. Kira chirped again and pressed against Daehyun's leg. She looked up at him and repeated the word more confidently this time. Mama. Ven and Sola came over too, curious about what their sister was doing. Soon all three cubs were pressed around Daehyun, and he stood in the middle of a small pile of scaled warm bodies. The crowd watched in amazement. Some were taking recordings, others were just staring, trying to process what they were seeing. A Centaurian diplomat raised her hand. I have a question for the human xenobiologist, she said, looking at Hana. Is this behavior normal for humans? Hana smiled. Actually, yes. Humans have always formed bonds with other species. On Earth, we have a long history of adopting and caring for animals that are not our own species. We raise orphaned wildlife. We keep pets and treat them like family. We form deep emotional connections with creatures that are completely different from us biologically. But why? Another alien asked. What is the evolutionary purpose? Cooperation, Hana explained. Humans survived not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we learned to work together. Not just with other humans, but with other species. We domesticated wolves into dogs to help us hunt. We partnered with horses for transportation. We learned to read the emotions and needs of other creatures. It is built into how our brains work. So this human's ability to bond with the Vrexian cubs is not unusual? A scholar asked. No, Hana said. What is unusual is that the rest of the galaxy never encountered this trait in such an obvious way before. You all thought human emotions made us weak. But our emotions, our ability to empathize across species lines, this is our strength. The scholars began talking excitedly among themselves. Research proposals were already being formed. Studies on human bonding behaviors, comparisons with other species. This was a breakthrough in understanding what humans brought to the galactic community. But Daehyun was not paying attention to any of that. He was focused on the three cubs pressed against him. Kira had fallen asleep boot. Sola was watching Borum, who had come closer again. Borum looked up at Daehyun. Can I sit with you and the cubs? Ask their parents first, Daehyun said gently, teaching her respect. Borum turned to Nira. May I please sit with the cubs? Nira looked at the tiny human child. Something in her ancient predator brain saw not a threat, but another young one. And her cubs liked this small human. Yes, she said. You may. Borum sat down next to Kira. The cub woke up enough to sniff the girl, then settled against her. Soon Ven and Sola came over too, curious about this new friend. The image was striking. A human man, 3 Vrexian cubs, and a human child all sitting together peacefully. Around them stood 2 massive Vrexian adults who should have been threatening, but instead looked protective and content. The ceremony continued, but everyone kept glancing at the group sitting on the floor. It was the real ceremony, the real symbol of unity. Not speeches or banners, but actual connection between different species. As the event wound down and beings started to leave, Dae-hyun prepared to go as well. But Kira grabbed his pant leg with her small,